So, can you tell me about your filmmaking journey? Why did you want to become a filmmaker and how it started?
Well, now it's. I think I had a very keen interest in filmmaking since my early days in school only. I love to watch a lot of films, and it always used to attract me. The directorial aspect of making a film. I mean, I was never a fan of the actors or, or the other aspects. I always wanted to know who made this film because I was exposed to different kinds of films, especially films made in language other than English. Other than Hollywood, which we nowadays call world cinema. I was exposed to from a very early age, mainly because
During
my
your
parents.
school days only?
Only I think quite early. I mean, when I was in my 10th standard or 9th standards from then, and especially when I was in my 11 and 12 studying science at the time, thanks to my parents, they also, loved cinema and art in general. So I grew up in a kind of a very culturally aware family. So I had watched a lot of films since I was in 12, and then I started engineering for a year and gave it up. By that time, I realized that I wanted to be a filmmaker, but for that, I wanted to also study something that is related to filmmaking. So I joined St. Xavier's Mass Communication and Videography. And in Xavier's, I actually understood the technicalities of it, of how to make a film. And before that, it was only my fascination for watching films and sometimes reading on them, reading books on films like David Bordwell, film art. I remembered when I was in my engineering year, in first year in engineering, I used to read more of Bordwell than any of my engineering books. In Xavier's, we had to make some projects as a part of the curriculum. I did them very seriously at the time, and I made my first proper short film called Koji in the year, I think, 2015, which was finally released in 2016, and that was on Mubi. And then in 2016, after graduating from St. Xavier's, I applied naturally to film school. To FTII. FTII was not taking any admission at that year. I think 2016 was a zero year for FTII. I applied for SRFTN and some of the other places, and I got rejected. So I decided that okay, I want to make another film of my own. I found my own company, U-Turn Pictures, with my collaborator Prithvijoy Ganguly, and both of us wrote and directed a film called Quiro in Nepali, which means fog. We went to Sikkim and shot on the Indo-China border and made a short film. Eventually, in 2019, both of these films, Koji and Kuiro, which I made before joining FTII, was acquired by Mubi. And then in 2017, FTII opened its admission. I took the exam, I stood first, and then I joined FTII. And then I had been making films as part of FTA projects, and sometimes I did my own projects under U-Turn Pictures as well. And well, now I'm making my in the shooting stage of my first debut feature film.
As you said, like your parents were also into arts, but why you opted for engineering?
Not into arts professionally, but like my mother is a singer, Negotian singer. My father used to play the sarod when he was young. After that, he had to give it up because of his profession. So both of my parents, they are very fond of cinema and music. So I like grew up in a family that encouraged, arts in general. So I was never discouraged by them when I told them that I want to make films, I want to give up engineering and join Xavier's and eventually film school. So that helped me along. Which is not the common story where one has to fight a lot with their parents to convince them. So in that way, that really helped me because I was always encouraged by them to do what I want to do.
But still, you first opted for engineering instead of.
That I did because I love science, and it's not that I did not love it. And back then I joined engineering, I think in 2012, 11, 12, and back then everybody was doing engineering, and all my friends went into it. So I wanted to study actually physics honors, but most of my friends opted for engineering. So that's why I went there because I thought I'll be with my friends. It's not that my parents told me to do it. I only did it, and then after a year, I realized that it's not my cup of tea. So I thought that if I am giving up 1 year, dropping 1 year, then instead of doing something else, let's do something which is related to filmmaking. So that was it.
Can you tell me about your experience in FTI? Currently, you are in FTI or have you passed
So I
out?
have passed out last year, January in 2022, with my diploma film Nehemich, which went to Cannes. So that was my final film.
So, what did
Uh,
FTI teach
the
you?
FTII, of course, as we all know, it has a very long heritage and a tradition of excellent filmmakers, and they have also created many of the FTI film direction students in the 90s and the late 80s. They created what was called the Indian New Wave and everything. It has a long tradition, so it's of course very nice to be a part of it. But FTI, is like your own hometown. You have a very love-hate relationship with it. I mean, I learned a lot from it, but I did not like many aspects of the course, the restrictions. I didn't like that they have. But of course, those restrictions, those rigors help you in some way. But if I have to be very frank, I think when I joined film school back then, before the pandemic, making a film was I think more difficult, because back I mean in 2017 also one had a lot of what to say hangover with technicalities of that film school is the only way for people like us. But I don't think today is the same situation, and so yeah, I'm very FTI is a very is a memory that will remain with me. I mean, it's something that I'll always carry with me. There were melancholic days in the college, and there were also very happy days in the college. And since I had made my own two films, which I produced and directed before joining FTII, so for me it was not something entirely new or not something that I have not heard or seen before. So initially, I felt that the course needs, I mean, it needs some changes. You need to, it should be in alignment with the change in the cinema that is taking place all over the world today. But saying that, I also love the love for tradition that FTA still tries to foster among the students. And the main perks of joining such a film school is that you get a group of batchmate who are coming from different parts of India. That is something I think is very special about film school. That you are exposed to different cultures, different language, different belief system, and you get an idea of a mini India. In our batch, there were Bengalis, there were people from Kerala, people from Tamil Nadu, and people from Delhi, people from Bihar, a village in Bihar. So many different friends of ours in the batch. We used to talk among ourselves, discuss cinema with different sensibilities. So that I think exposes you a lot and makes you very. It opens your eyes that to our country has so much range, in terms of culture. So that is something very very interesting in a film school.
So, you might have seen a lot of movies there. So, you want to recommend few movies?
Well, actually, before joining FTA, I was a very, very strong film buff. I mean, I had seen most of my films, which I love a lot, during my Xavier's days. I used to watch a lot of films. In FTI, actually, I was exposed to some other art forms more deeply, like painting, like literature, and I also developed my interest in photography more seriously in FTI. Uh, and these days, I can't say that I watch a lot of films, but I do time to time. But I have stopped watching a lot of films because when you make films, at one point you feel like if you see a lot, because there's a lot now on the internet, there's a lot to watch. It sometimes feels very overwhelming to do something, and I often lack the motivation if I see a lot. So these days, I don't see. But I can recommend some films which are really, really have remained a very strong source of inspiration for me, and I rewatch them at times. Like Robert Bresso's Musheth. It's a black and white film. It's a very peculiar film, and towards the end of the film, the girl who is shown, who is perhaps committing suicide, perhaps it's suggested that act of taking one's own life or maybe just jumping into a river is shown with such sensitivity and such uh, what should I say, such a poignant way that it it still is a very mysterious film to me, you know. And I still try to understand that what exactly happens to the girl called Musharit in the end of the film. So that film is a very strong. It is a strong memory with me. And then, if I start with the classics, Bergman's Winter Sleep, Winter Light. Sorry, Bergman's Winter Light. That film, for me, it's my personal favorite from Bergman because it was the first film I saw without a background score. I saw it when I was in class 11, I guess, and I had never seen a film before without a background score, with only the ambient sound acting almost like music. That film is very strong. And then uh, there's one film by Jean-Luc Godard which I really love is Not the Music, which is in English it's called Our Music. It's about Palestine and Israel, and there's a very long conversation between Godard himself as the filmmaker and a Palestinian poet, Mahmoud Darwish. And rewatching that film today, I understand that Godard had a very strong foresight of what's actually happening in Palestine today. It's kind of foreshadowed there in the film, which was made, I think, in 2009, if I'm not wrong, or maybe earlier than that. So that film is it's one of my personal films from Jean-Luc Godard. And among the contemporaries, or the current filmmakers, I love Turkish films and Iranian films a lot. Of course, most of the Abbas Kiarostami films I can recommend. Almost everything. I mean, you can't pick out one. Then I have a strong fascination for Turkish director Nuri Bilge Ceylan. His film Once Upon a Time in Anatolia, which he won the grand prize at Cannes. It's perhaps till today can't say my most favorite film, but the film that had the strongest impression on me, which kind of changed the way I look at cinema. I watched it when I was in Xavier's in 2014, and I still remember the memory of having seen it for the first time, and it simply blew me away. That film, and there is few documentaries, and few documentary filmmakers who kind of made non-fiction in a way which is very close to fiction, in a very let's say in a very meditative way. For example, the director Gianfranco Rossi, he has a film called Fire at Sea, and then his recent film Nocturno. Then Victor Kosakowski's early films like Beloved. Beloved is something very special for me because when that film was shown in FTII to us, there is a scene where Kosakowski uses a song from a Raj Kapoor's film, played by Lata Mangeshkar. So hearing a Lata Mangeshkar song playing over the images of Lake Baikal in Russia, it was very weird but beautiful. And then I later read and realized that Kosakowski didn't understand the lyrics of the song. He had seen Raj Kapoor's film and he somehow felt that the song went with the mood of the scene without knowing what the song meant. But actually, what the song meant also goes with the images shown, of Lake Baikal and a small family living near that lake. And that film is very strong on my mind. And then Kosakowski's all of his films. I mean, I love him a lot. Um his his film Aquarella, which is a film on water, you know, water in general. It's a very beautiful piece of cinema, I guess. And this year, again, I loved Nuri Bilge Ceylan's latest film about dry grasses, and also Aki Kaurismäki's film Fallen Leaves. These are the two films that are, I think, liked a lot this year. So yeah, this much I can say. I
Any
don't know if
Indian,
there are
any Indian film?
Indian films. Yes, I mean, of course, the whole body of work of Satyajit Ray. It is undoubtedly. I mean, no matter how much we have maybe spoken, and everybody talks about Ray when it comes to India, but I can't deny that his films are very strong on me. His, I think my most favorite are two of his films, Opera Jito The Unvanquished, which is the second part of the Opera trilogy, and his city film on the Naxalite movement in Calcutta called Pratidwandi, The Adversary. Which are these two films are very different from each other, stylistically speaking, with respect to the subject and how he dealt with it. But these two films strongly resonate with me, and I can feel that he had such a range. He was so versatile as a director. I mean, I like most of his films, but Pratidwandi and Aparajit are very close to my heart, and also his last film Agontuk, The Stranger. I mean, initially when I saw it, I didn't like it that much, but with each year, I think I'm going back to that film again and again. And of course, there's Ritik Ghatak. His Shubha Anurekha is, I think, I can say my most Indian, most favorite Indian film ever made. I mean, that's an epic film. It's very very powerful. And among the contemporaries, there are many films I like. For example, there's a film, a Bengali film called Asha Jawar Majhe. That English was Labor of Love by Aditya Vikram Sengupta. I like that film a lot. It is a very different kind of a film with no dialogue at all. And then there is a recently I saw the Manipuri film by my friend Dominic Sangma called Rapture, which was shown in Busan, and then I saw it in Mami. I was completely bowled over by that film. The sheer beauty of the film, and also how he blends the political scenario right now in Manipur with uh, the local wisdom of the Manipuri people. I think it's one of the best films in recent years in India.
So I wanted to ask how the idea for Nehemich came for you.
Well, it's a diploma film, so we all knew that we had to write a script, and submit it on time. So it so happened that I was touring a lot. I made a documentary before Nehemich, also FTI documentary called Kalsubai. And while making that film, I actually had the chance of traveling in different parts of Maharashtra and talking to people, knowing the culture a little more deeply. So that kind of helped me to, first of all, decide that I want to make a film in Marathi, because I don't like the idea of making a film in Maharashtra and making it in Bengali. It makes no sense to me. So I was actually traveling a lot, not for a film. I was traveling to do photography in the monsoon, because the Western Ghats look beautiful in the monsoon. So I took a car and it roamed about in different parts of it. There I chanced upon a windmill farm in Chalkewari, where I remember that I had stopped my car when I heard some rambling sound of the blade moving. I didn't understand, because in the fog the sound was muffled and it was like a rumble. And then it came out. It was very foggy. I couldn't see a thing in my front. But slowly, when the fog was clearing, I saw that I was standing on a road that had gone for miles on end with almost 500 windmills on either side. That was a very strong image. So then I went to a few people who work as windmill guards. I talked to them. I photographed them. But even then, I didn't have a film idea. But that moment of suddenly discovering myself on a lonely road with so many windmills on either sides was a very strong uh, memory in me. Then I was reading an article, I think on a paper, where I read that a woman had died in a village called Gadchiroli, some 800 kilometers from Pune, while she was during her periods, and she was isolated in a gaonkar. So the word gaonkar I heard for the first time. I asked my friends; they told me it means village in Marathi. But then when I read a little more, I understood that there's another meaning to it. It is, of course, in the general way, it means village, but the other way is that menstruation is a taboo in India even today. But in Maharashtra and Nepal, especially in these two regions, there's a particular ritual where you isolate the women who are going through the menstrual cycle into huts, generally outside the village, with little or no proper sanitary systems, and they have to cook their own food. They have to live alone, and they cannot, make any contact with any male person. And it said that during menstruation, even if a man crosses the shadow of that woman, that man will not be able to bear a child. stuff like that. So the taboo around menstruation is very strong. And the women in the villages, they do not refer to the word period as period. They have a code word for it. They call that we have been touched by the crow. This is the phrase that they use. So when a girl tells another girl that I have been touched by a crow, automatically the girl understands the other one that this girl is going through her periods. Since period word is also a taboo word, they have developed a code word for it. And side by side, when I was reading about windmills, I also found that generally when there's a windmill farm, you don't get to hear birds at all around that place, because what happens initially when the windmill farm is starting, the birds don't understand what are these blades and all. They go through the blades, they die, and often the blades stop working because of the hitting of the birds. And in a technical way, the it is referred to bird shattering as one of the key reasons for why for why a windmill blade can stop functioning. But with time, the birds, they get to know that okay, there is this blades which are lethal to them, so they slowly move away from that area, and the windmill farm becomes bereft of any bird sound. And generally these are crows which move through these blades and die, because crows are the regular bird. And this idea of a crow which can die because of a windmill blade, and the phrase that the woman uses in the villages that I have been touched by a crow to indicate that I have my period, which means I have to be isolated. These two things, two completely different things, somehow I found are associated in some way in my own mind, you know. And I tried to bring these two elements, two themes, into a single cohesive story, where there's the story of a young girl who is inside such a hut during her period, wants to get out of the hut and elope with a lover who happens to be a god in a windmill form. And I felt that this story will be uh, the best way to contextualize the story will be at the background of the pandemic, because my key interest was that what happened to those women in these isolated huts during menstruation when the covid was at its peak. Because what these women went through, the isolation of being looked at as an untouchable every periodical cycle of their menstruation, covid was a situation where we all went through the same experience as a human race. So I thought that what was very unique for us during covid perhaps was not so unique experience for the women, you know. So I wanted to know that during pandemic what happened to these women, were they still isolated when the entire world was isolated in their homes? Eventually I didn't find any concrete answer to this, so I developed a story trying to, you know, trying to understand what can happen to a girl inside a hut, isolated because of menstruation, when the entire world outside is also inside their four walls during pandemic, and what happens if she decides to run away with a lover who is a windmill god. So this is how briefly it kind of shaped up.
So, how was the experience while shooting? Any difficulties you may have faced there while shooting?
You see, there's always a challenge for each film, and there's always difficulty. Since it's an FTII project, we had some restrictions as part of the syllabus. Like we couldn't shoot anywhere beyond 200 kilometer of Pune. We had to shoot within 200 kilometer. Then we had a very strong shooting ratio. We had to make the film in 1:4 ratio. I mean, we cannot go for many takes. Only two cards are given to us, and we have to make within that. And I generally prefer a lot of retakes. For me, that was difficult. Other than that, not much difficulty. It was difficult to write the story. You know, for me, writing is difficult to weave, and you never know. I mean, even when a script is finished, I am, I don't know whether this is something good. So I keep on changing even during the shoot, even during edit, dubbing. It was not so difficult, but it's a good learning experience for me, because in this film I had changed even lines during the dubbing process. You know. It was very interesting, and also it was difficult because I was doing a film in Marathi, which is not my language, but I had been doing short films in languages which are not my mother tongue. I mean, I had made two Nepali films, then a Kashmiri film, then one Marathi documentary. So it was something that I had got more or less used to it. Still, in a fiction, it becomes a little difficult when you do not know exactly what they're speaking, you know. So I tried to understand that how the translation, my DA did the translation, what kind of translation she was doing. So it was interesting to see how the film also develops on its own.
So it's true,
Not
like
much challenge.
a film is made in during writing and during shooting and during editing.
It all depends, I think, on the material. I mean, there can be some film which is really, really made in the writing, you know, and there's some films, some material which often demands a lot of uh, improvisation, changes, and it also depends on the style of the director and the resources as well. I mean, one can't generalize, you know. It depends from one film to the other, but of course writing is the first stage, and for me I think it's the most difficult thing to write a film, because what might read as a very good piece of literature might not turn out to be a very good piece of film script, and what might look or feel while reading that it's very mundane, it's very terse, or it has no emotion, one if one shoot it in a different way, it can completely transform. So judging a script is a very difficult thing, you know. And I find the most difficult, I think the most difficult aspect is actually writing the screenplay of a film.
While making the film, where you were, did you knew that it will win awards at Cannes?
Number one, it didn't win award at
Sorry,
Cannes. It
in
was a
it was in
competition
competition.
selection. It was a
Did you
competition
know
selection in Cannes.
it will
Of
go?
course not.
Okay.
No, no, not at all. I don't keep anything in mind, because that's the perks of being in a film school, you know, where you are not responsible to any producer or anyone. You can do exactly what you want to do. That's the main reason for joining film school. So I had absolutely nothing in mind, and uh, I also felt that the film might seem very ambiguous to many people because the film has a kind of an open end structure. But then after making the film, I found the Khan's deadline was approaching, so I sent it without any expectation.
So any filmmaker you might have met and appreciated your film.
Any filmmaker?
Anybody who has seen your film in the film festival and appreciated your film.
Well, I'm very lucky to say that many people did see the film and they loved it a lot. I can't name one particular. There are many who liked the film, and also before sending it to Cannes, I had shared it with some of the filmmakers from FTI, our alumni, our seniors. They also more or less liked the film. So yeah, but you know, sometimes I these days I don't try to show the film to many people before it is out on a festival or anywhere, because you don't know, and it's very difficult, you know, because people can be very harsh in FTA as well, which helps you, definitely helps you. But this film, more or less, was quite liked by the people. There, I mean, when I showed it to my juniors and my batchmates, some of them found that the film is a little ambiguous at places. That was there, which was also kind of what I wanted to do, because during pandemic we were living in a world full of confusion and ambiguity. So that atmosphere of ambiguity I did want to bring in the film, but then maybe many people with a different taste in cinema might have found it too ambiguous. But more or less in Cannes, people loved it a lot. I mean, we got a kind of 6 minute standing ovation. So there, it was very broadly appreciated.
If somebody wants to see where they can find this film.
It is on 20th January. It will be screening simultaneously in Bombay and Kolkata in a auditorium called Rotary Southern as a part of a festival. And in Bombay, there's a Kala Ghora Arts Film Festival. There it is being shown, and it will also be shown in some other festivals. And after that, I don't know, because since it's a film project, FTII film, I cannot send it to any OTT platform. So unfortunately, people have to only watch it in the festivals, And after the festivals, if they DM me, I'll share them the link. That's all.
Uh, FTI admission has opened, so any advice if somebody wants to join FTI?
I think I am the wrong person, because now FTI exam patterns have changed a lot. When I joined, I think I have heard that it has changed a lot. There's a lot of MCQs, which is, I don't think is a right way to assess a film student at all. And but anyway, I think in general there is nothing to. It's a very personal opinion of mine that there's nothing in general to prepare. You see, except for the subjective part, except that you watch a lot of films, you keep yourself updated with what's happening in the current last 10, 20 years in Indian cinema, because after all, FTA do focus a lot on the Indian cinemas and the Indian cinema of the 90s and the Indian new wave, and FTI filmmakers like the contributions of Manikal, Kumar Shan, and all that. But these days they have a different pattern of questions, MCQs, which range from anything from space to, I mean, to sports journalism.
Current
So
affairs.
I don't know. Those MCQs I don't know how to crack.
Any future projects currently you are working?
I'm currently working on my first feature film with my collaborator Prithvi Joy. We are currently in the pre-production stage of the film.
It will be released this year or
No, no, I think by end of this year we are planning to wrap up the shoot, because we have several schedules. I don't know when it'll be over, but of course, we'll try to make the film within a year and a half. That's the plan.
thank you so much, Idhi, for joining the
Thank you for
podcast.
having me.
It's such an honor to be able to talk to you.
My pleasure.
I hope we'll keep in touch. And
Surely. And all the very best for your entrance.
thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Bye.